what is it about looking poor? Why is it important? Well, the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to work until you're 65 and be anxious about money for all those years? If not, we have these 4 lifestyle choices to avoid. After spending over a decade as an economist and studying personal finance, there's a direct correlation between living modestly and building wealth. There's a slippery slope you can fall into right from the start. This first step is about controlling your spend on 2 of the biggest status items you can hold. And avoiding overspending on these wealth killers can be key. Take my friend Tom. He had 2 choices when buying his first home. The first house, A, costing around £450,000, and the second house, B, around £280,000. Okay, let's break this down. The immediate difference in monthly costs is £1,600, but that's just the beginning. Over a year, including all costs, House A will cost £41,800, while House B costs £26,200. That's a £15,600 annual difference. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If Tom invested that £15,600 difference each year and earned a modest 7% return, after 20 years, he'd have £642,000. That's the power of compound interest working for you instead of against you. To a certain extent, this could apply to renting as well. And we haven't even talked about cars yet. A new BMW 5 Series costs around £45,000. A reliable used Toyota Corolla, about £12,000. That £33,000 difference invested over 20 years at 7% return would earn you about £127,000. Really not something that you should overlook. Okay, sliding further down this slippery slope, let's imagine you've bought the expensive house and the expensive car. You now feel the need to keep up this lifestyle and you're influenced by the people that live around your area. This is how lifestyle inflation creeps in. Now, here's where it gets interesting and slightly amusing. My friend Charlotte moved to an upmarket area, thinking that she'd found her dream home. But what she actually found was the neighbourhood appearance police. Within weeks, her neighbour was at her door about the state of her front garden. Then it was the weeds, and then the colour of her door, and so on. To the point where Charlotte actually started to care about these things too. She remodelled her front garden, she got new windows, she added external lighting, all costing upwards of around £10,000 within 1 year. And all for the sake of looking good for someone else. And inside it was the same story. When you're surrounded by expensive things, expensive starts to feel normal. Your £500 sofa looks shabby next to your neighbour's £3,000 one. Your IKEA kitchen suddenly feels inadequate compared to their bespoke units. This is known as reference point bias. We judge our own situation not by absolute standards, but by comparing ourselves to those around us. Move to an expensive area, and suddenly your reference points shift dramatically. And lifestyle inflation isn't just about big purchases. It seeps into every aspect of your life, from getting your coffee from a coffee shop instead of brewing it at home, to filling your wardrobe with designer clothes instead of regular high street brands. Each decision might seem small, but together they can add hundreds or even thousands to your monthly expenses. So, if you've bought the big house and the expensive car, you've been sucked in by lifestyle inflation. You're then likely to go into what we call financial quicksand. Plato once observed that the greatest wealth is to live content with little. And looking at today's world, his ancient wisdom really does seem more relevant than ever. Let's talk about lifestyle inflation for a minute. A recent survey found that 48% of people who received a pay rise admitted to immediately increasing their spending to match their new income, with luxury cars and housing upgrades being the top 2%. purchases. Even more telling, 65% of these individuals reported feeling more financially stressed after their lifestyle upgrades, despite earning more money. That's a lot of people trapped in a self-made financial pressure cooker. The more you commit to high-cost lifestyle choices, the harder it becomes to change course. It's similar to what we call sunk cost fallacy in economics. Continuing an expensive behaviour, not because it makes sense, but because you've already invested so much in it. When you're in financial quicksand, it affects everything. You're constantly on edge thinking about money. Every penny that comes in goes straight back out. There's no room for building that emergency fund or investing in the future or even planning for retirement. And the worst part is, if something unexpected happens, and let's face it, life is full of surprises, you're immediately under pressure because there's no financial buffer. But there's a better way. The bigger the gap between what you earn and what you spend, the more freedom and peace of mind you'll have. It's like giving yourself permission to breathe easier or take calculated risks if you want to, which is huge. A former colleague of mine took a 30% pay cut to switch careers because her modest lifestyle meant that she could afford to, which is not so easy to do with a massive mortgage payment and 2 luxury car payments. Well, if you don't manage to avoid any of these lifestyle choices, then you'll probably find yourself falling into the retirement trap. And this is where these choices will really come back to bite you, as your expensive lifestyle will need extra retirement income. The average age of retirement in the UK is 64 for women, 65 for men, and in the US it's 62. If you've lived an expensive lifestyle, you'll likely be working to at least this figure and possibly beyond. There's a certain irony in spending so much money trying to look successful that you can never afford to stop working. Okay, here's an example to help show you the difference. Let's break down what different lifestyles mean for your retirement needs. If you're living on £5,000 monthly, so that's £60,000 annually, following the 4% rule, you'll need about £1.5 million to retire comfortably. Cut that lifestyle to £3,000 monthly, so that's around £36,000 annually, and suddenly you only need £900,000 for retirement. But here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say you're 30 and want to retire at 60. To reach 1.5 million, assuming a 7% return, you'd need to save £1,350 monthly. For the £900,000 goal, just £810 monthly. It's the difference between saying I have to work versus I choose to work. And remember, these calculations assume everything goes perfectly. They don't account for market downturns, health emergencies, job losses, family emergencies, and economic changes. The higher your lifestyle choices, the more vulnerable you are to these disruptions. It's like building a house of cards. The higher you build it, the more likely it is to collapse. But we've highlighted how to avoid these now, so hopefully in the future these won't be keeping you up at night. If this has made you realise that you're spending too much and you want tips on how to save, this video here on how to make your first 10k will help you get started. See you there.